Hey, what's up, podcast? It's Jeff, and you are listening to a special bonus episode of Teach Better Talk. This is audio pulled from one of our daily drop-ins. That's right, daily drop-ins are back every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time over on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. This is happening from November 23rd all the way to December 18th, so join us on any of the social media platforms. We are at Teach Better Team for our daily drop-ins. We're here to support you, answering questions, talking about fun stuff, bringing on special guests, anything you need, we're here for you. Join us for the daily drop-ins. Let's get into this special bonus episode. Enjoy.
Morning, everyone. It's Rae from the Teach Better team, and I have an incredible guest, Jessica, who we will be able to talk to all morning long for our daily drop-in. As you guys know, we are live every single morning at 8:30 a.m. Eastern to talk shop, create a great space to hang out, and hopefully get you set for your morning. We have so many things that we're going to dive into. Please use the chat to share your name, where you're currently watching from. We're streaming on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch, and we'll get started here in just a minute. Morning, everyone. Happy daily drop-in. Jessica, I am so glad you're here to kick off our Friday. I felt like this was very serendipitous. I think our network is really going to love just learning about you, hanging out with you. How are you feeling this morning?
I am feeling I want to say good, but I'm going to dig deeper for an emotional vocabulary word here. This morning I'm feeling calm and focused. I feel good for the weekend. How about you?
I am, first of all, thrilled that you're feeling this way, because that is going to mean that we're going to have an even better conversation than I expected. But I'm feeling good. I was a little sleepy this morning and trying to kind of like wake up. You know, when you just have like an icky night's sleep and you're like, all right, I got to reset. I'm not going to let my bad night's sleep control, my day. So I was thrilled to start my morning with you, because I'm like, this is going to be a really good conversation.
Yep. I always feel like the week right after a holiday break, first of all, I think the time between Thanksgiving break and winter break is probably one of the hardest times for a teacher anyway, but especially this year. So I've had a few of those mornings this week, actually. And I use the tools in our tool belt and Move This World, and I do some deep breathing exercises even before I get out of bed, just to kind of reset and try to leave some of that anxiety and stress from a bad night's sleep before I even leave my bed.
Well, I'm excited to dive into all that, because I know you have access to so many resources, tips, and tricks for educators that can also support our students. I want to say good morning to everyone that is watching, just popping on in the comments. Kate's already commenting good morning. She's always on top of it. Kate's like a professional at like trying to be the first one commenting, which I love.
Amazing. Good morning, Kate.
Famous Jeff Gargis. I mean, Jeff, good morning. I hope you're doing well, buddy. Haven't talked to you in 12 hours. So, eager to hear how your day's going as well. Remember, the Daily Drop-In is live every single morning. We stream all over on Facebook and Twitter and Twitch and YouTube. But you can also catch these over on bonus episodes of the Teach Better Talk podcast. So if you're not catching us live right now and you're catching us after the fact, then try and mark your calendars in the next few days to join us live, because it's a really fun conversation. Jessica, as Chelsea's popping in and say good morning, and Brianna, would you mind sharing a little bit about you? Because if our network hasn't connected with you yet, I'd love for them to better understand your role in education, kind of what you do, and then eventually we have to learn about Move This World, just because it can be so connected to the ideas that we're talking about today in our daily drop-in.
So I'm Jessica. Good morning. Happy Friday, everybody. It's so great to be joining you here. I was a high school special education teacher in the South Bronx. I started as a teaching fellow here in New York City, and I became the head of the special ed department my second year teaching, and really had a jam-packed 4 years in the classroom. And part of that experience included some traumatic events that really broke me, I guess you could say, just to keep it completely real. Burnout is a really real thing. And And I knew that a jaded burnout teacher wasn't doing any favors for students and wasn't good in the classroom. So I left the classroom. I went behind the scenes. I've been working in ed tech the past few years, still supporting teachers. But teacher mental health is really, really important to me. Ongoing self-care and support for social, emotional, and mental wellness to keep teachers in the classroom, to better support students with these really critical skills. So now I'm community manager here at Move This World, and I get to support teachers all across the country and kind of celebrate the work that they're doing and help them not only care for themselves, but support this work with their students as well.
Well, Jessica, I'm thrilled you're here because as we talked about Move This World, I mean, it's an extensive, comprehensive website curriculum support for teachers. And what we wanted to do in this daily drop-in is try and give as much value to you listening, participating with us in this conversation as humanly possible. Jessica and I talked shop for hours. I loved collaborating with you over the phone the past few weeks, just trying to figure out how can we bring you into our network and just talk about all the things, something that will be helpful so that every single teacher can start really looking at critical lens on what they're doing for self-care, what they're doing to prevent burnout, and really make sure we're elevating ourselves forward in a positive way. For the sake of context, Jessica, I may not be the best at this, to be completely transparent. I actually just had a conversation yesterday. They're asking about my Saturday calendar, like what I was doing for the weekend. And I'm like, oh, I'm in meetings from 8 a.m. to 4:30. And they're like, hey. I'm like, I know. But here's the deal. Like, I need to put in strategies, but I also love my job. And so finding a balance is true. But I also want to put out there, Jessica, just kind of name the elephant in the room. For the majority of my career, and when I say the majority, I mean up until a few years ago, like this year maybe, I thought teacher burnout was super embarrassing to talk about. I was like, you can admit to that. Like that makes you no longer an educator that people want to affiliate with because you've experienced it or are experiencing it. So I just want to lay that elephant out in the room that I've been there, we've been there. So what strategies can we put in place to not be there for an extended period of time and hopefully not get there again? So I'm thrilled that you're here because this is what I need. This is Rae PD, just so you know.
We all need it. I mean, it's something, I think as teachers, we support so many other people and we see the best in our students. We see the best in our colleagues. We work really hard to be our best selves every day. But usually what that means as an educator is that all of those other people are coming first. And so when I think about teacher self-care, I think, you can't wait for a weekend. You can't wait for a holiday break. You have to build moments into your day. And I think one of the best ways that you can do that is inviting your students and modeling things with and for your students. So Move This World, we have SEL curriculum for pre-K through 12th grade, and all of our curriculum is video-based and experiential. So teachers get to participate along with their students, press play, and they're getting up and they're practicing kinesthetic empathy and they're moving and they're doing exercises rooted in creative expression to better tune inward to themselves and how they're feeling, and then to be able to express that in healthy ways to the people around them and build stronger relationships. So from students to staff to families, that's what we're cultivating in school communities through our curriculum. And for me, based on my experience, I had started kind of integrating a few of these practices way back when I was in the classroom many, many years ago, before I'd ever heard of Move This World, unfortunately. And that was what was starting to kind of keep me going when things were really in a dire situation in my school community, I would say, is my students would be the one to say, Miss, we are not, our school is a little crazy today. Can we just stop and meditate for 5 minutes? And we would do that together.
Yeah. No, Jessica, I really want to dive into a word that you focused on. I think you said twice so far, this idea of experiential, learning, because it really focuses on, rather than just being a consumer, really being able to live and breathe these strategies on your own and have your students have that same effect. So I want to dive into that. I do want to give a shout out to Jeff, who's saying meetings all days and Saturdays aren't a bad thing. That's because, Jessica, I'm meeting with him for all the time. He's like, it's not that bad, Rae. You're with me. I'm like, Jeff Gargis. I'm just
lucky to have these meetings.
Yeah, I'm looking at my calendar and I'm like, the last 2 hours aren't with you, but the rest of the time is with you. So that's why Jeff's like, Saturday morning sounds great. It's so funny. So
I mean, I'm the same way. Believe me, my friends, my family, my therapist, everyone is like, can we work on this, Jessica? Because I will work all day long, all weekend long, because I'm passionate about it and I love it. And that's why I feel so grateful to do what I do. But even with that, it's reminding myself that the better I take care of myself in small micro moments throughout my day, the better I'm able to do the things that I love.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally understand that and totally agree. If you are listening right now live for our daily drop-in, please throw your questions, concerns, hurdles, struggles, observations in the chat, because this is, I know, a topic that impacts every single person in our network a little bit differently. And so if there's a strategy you love that you want to share so that we can continue to amplify your voice and the things that have worked for you, we'd love to see that in the chat. If you're somebody who has a question, maybe you're reflecting like, oh, I'm more like Rae, I don't do this very well at all. Please throw that in the chat. We all love to not feel like we're alone. But if you're somebody who's also maybe working on this, Jessica, I'm not sure if you caught a daily drop-in we did with Lindsay Titus. Lindsay Titus is our go-to for a lot of these conversations. She's just so passionate about this idea. And she shared a lot of strategies that were very, very simple, and people really resonated with having small, simple things that they can do throughout their day to feel good. And so I want to get into those strategies with you here, because the more we can share, ideas that were working for us or are working for our friends, the more successful we're going to be. So I love your focus of trying to find small things throughout the day versus, okay, so you're going to go the whole month, and then that end of the month, guess what? You get to have a smoothie. Good for you, right?
Right. Just hold out until you have a free weekend for that bubble bath. No. Exactly. We can do better.
Yeah, I always think about that, because I know there's a stereotype that people who don't love their job are eager for the weekend. And what I find is that even people that love their job occasionally really, really want that weekend, purely because they're not implementing these strategies throughout the week. It has nothing to do with not being passionate. Like, teachers feel so much guilt when they're like, oh my God, I need a day off. It doesn't mean we don't love our kids. It doesn't mean we don't love our job. So I don't know, what is like your favorite strategy or your go-to strategy to suggest something throughout the day?
I'm really big into breathing. And, in Move This World, we have kind of movements coordinated with a lot of the strategies that we reinforce. So sometimes you'll see me, even when I'm in meetings, I'll do it. I'll like inhale and exhale, and I'm very visual with it. But even with breathing, there are a lot of different things that you can do to use your breath mindfully. Earlier this week, we actually hosted a webinar about practical self-care. So these small things that you can do. And one thing we talked about was...
Can we preface, Jessica, because we've had this conversation, all your webinars are free.
Yes, all of our webinars are free.
So I want to make sure our network knows that. When she's talking about like, oh, we did a webinar, that's not a sales pitch. These are free PD opportunities. Go crazy. So go ahead, Jessica. Sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. Thanks for that. Important to note. And for teachers, everybody, I've even had teachers ask, my family, can they watch as well? Will this be relevant for them? Yes, the more the merrier. Again, when you're practicing these strategies along with your children at home or with your students, A, you get to practice them, but B, you're modeling for them that this is really important, that they can tune inwards and understand how they feel, and that they can manage that and express that in healthy ways. So the breathing, one thing I really love, and it's so simple, is focusing on a longer exhale than your inhale. So inhaling for 4, maybe holding for 2 beats, and then exhaling for 7. And what that's doing is it's actually slowing down your nervous system. You can feel your body calming down. So I say when you're really in a pinch, that's a helpful thing you can do. We even took it up a notch in our webinar when we were talking about it, and doing something like identifying a color and then looking around the room and finding everything you can see in that color. I have a lot of red around me, so I could say red. If you can focus on all of the red things. It's something that you can do for yourself when you are feeling yourself heightened and escalated, to just kind of take a moment and calm down. But it's also really great for transitions with students. So when you're coming back from recess, or maybe when you're all getting into a Zoom room together and starting your class and everyone's so excited to see each other, prompting everybody to take some deep breaths while they look for everything that's yellow around them. It's a way to really focus, because then you're not just calming down your nervous system, but you're also focusing your mind and using your visual senses to stop and look.
Well, and I love that strategy because it's something that every single educator can do with every single student, no matter where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's kind of struggle with some of the strategies that I occasionally hear that you have to be in a certain environment, you have to have the right resources, you have to have the right tools. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure those are great activities as well. But right now, a lot of teachers are feeling helpless. They're feeling like they have a lot to prepare for to then support their students. And that's a cool strategy that regardless of where your students are in their learning space, every single person can do that. So I have a lot of blue around me, just so you know. So I think like blues, greens would be really, really hard. Red, I think that's my only red thing. I don't think I have it.
I also see a red book.
Oh, good point.
It looks like even one of the other books that maybe has red on the cover from this view.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that is
focusing in.
Lead Like a Pirate by Shelley and great book. Oh, and we have Bold Humility by Dave Schmittou. And cool, Unforgettable. Really good book.
This is how we applaud and move this world. So I do this a lot when I talk.
It's a good strategy. I like this. This is a fun game. I like this. It's good.
Yeah. I always say, like, when in doubt, if you're in a pinch, go back to the senses. Again, my sped teacher mind is like, if you have a student who has visual impairments, try sound, try textile things. Senses are something that show up a lot in our curriculum, where when we're talking about emotional vocabulary words, we'll do things like, what does that look like in your body? What does that sound like? If that was a movement, what movement would that be? So that students can explore things like anger or excitement through these creative lenses.
I really love that. And senses are so important. I know that even when we do training on like our Teach Further model that we do with the Teach Better team, we always talk about incorporating your 5 senses. And it's not always easy to pull all 5 senses in, but if you can grab a few especially and then vary it up throughout different learning experiences, it's so fun. It just adds a lot more dynamic to the learning. So I think that's
I think movement is really a critical mechanism for our emotional selves, for our emotional well-being. So I remember you asked this question a while ago, what do I like to do? Breathing and movement. Breathing exercises and yoga are my personal go-to, even if that means a 10-minute stop in my day or a full hour class in the evenings. But it's also why you see a lot of movement in our curriculum as well. The opportunity to get up, move around, which I think I've been thinking about this so much this year, that for teachers, your jobs are always up and moving around. It's not often that you're sitting in front of a computer, and now your teaching life is in front of a screen, and that's so different. So I think looking for opportunities, even behind a screen, to get up with your students together virtually and move is really, really powerful right now.
Well, and it's interesting you say that because so the school that I work in, I work on a team. I'm in a middle school. And the team of teachers I work with are all wonderful. But the most common thing they've discussed is like how exhausting it is to sit all day, because every other teacher on my team normally would be like moving, walking, running, pacing. We'd all be doing these different things throughout the day. And so it was a silly suggestion of like, well, why don't we all have like a standing desk? Why aren't we all doing things like this? And it's funny because when you're out of the classroom, you almost like go towards the norms of the room you're working in. Like I am in an office that is set up to be seated. Whereas in my classroom, it's not really set up to sit down. Like it's set up to move. And I think that your environment really needs to be supportive of the type of workspace you need. And so if you need to be standing up right now, then you need to change your physical environment to allow that to be easy for you to do.
Yeah. And you can even, again, do those in small ways throughout your day. One thing that we practice as a team that we encourage teachers to practice as well with their students is starting and ending your time together with an opening and a closing exercise. And so on our team, when we have meetings, we will typically all stand up together and open with some deep breaths, maybe with some reflection. and we'll do some of our, think about how you're feeling right now and what that would look like in a statue, and we'll do those statues, and then we'll sit down and we'll have our regular meeting, and then we'll stand up again at the end and we'll breathe together and close it out. So again, finding ways that you can just vary your activity throughout the day is really helpful.
I like that because I feel like if I did that with my 11-year-olds, it would end in a giggle. Like, I think students would just, like, I think we would do it because it'd be fun. Mm-hmm. And then I think we'd all be giggling. And I'm like, oh, what a fun way to start class with everyone like laughing, having moved. Like, there'll be a joke or two thrown out and like, yep. Awesome. Like, now we really are in community together versus just existing in the same virtual space. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, totally. It's great. We love the laughter, the fun. Diving into emotions can feel really heavy. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why a lot of adults are not comfortable being vulnerable, especially in this environment where you're not. It's one thing when you're with your students every day and you're seeing them and checking in with them. But when you're looking at them on a screen, or I know a lot of my former high school colleagues, their students are not turning their cameras on. And so they're teaching names on a screen who they've never met before. And so finding ways that you can create laughter together, again, right now when we're so separated is really, really powerful because that builds trust. Mm-hmm. And from there, you can dive in and you can be more vulnerable and talk about some of the emotions that are maybe a little more difficult to talk about.
Yes, I think that's so crucial right now. And taking the time, giving yourself permission to do those goofy things, those funny things to create laughter, that's not unused time. That's not time to be, sad that you're losing. That's a really important moment to build community because that buy-in is then going to boost your entire group forward as you're learning through the content as well. So mm-hmm. I love that stuff. I think anytime we can get our students laughing is a major priority.
Yep. I used to always tell my students, because it all goes back to, brain science for me.
Right.
And the kind of short way that I would explain that to my students, I started to use that as like a disciplinary reaction when a student was off task. Instead of like, positive reinforcement of somebody else or trying to recorrect them, I would try to get them laughing. I would try to capture their attention and get them laughing and then redirect them. And I would tell them, I said, when you're laughing, when you're enjoying yourself, when you're in a good mood, your brain is more malleable. Your brain matter is ready to refocus and learn. But if I say something to you that maybe puts you on guard or makes you feel defensive, all that's doing is hardening your brain and making it even harder for you to refocus and learn. And my high school students were very, very receptive to that.
No, I believe it. I mean, I'm just thinking of when I'm learning or I'm getting feedback, it's way more, it's way easier to swallow and be reflective when you're getting feedback after you're in a great mood, after you've joked, after you've laughed with someone versus walking in and knowing that you're going to be getting feedback. You can feel your body tense up, your mm-hmm. brain closes, and then you're almost on the defensive depending on who you're speaking with. And that's not healthy. That's not helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it goes back to relationships. If you're getting feedback from somebody who you trust, who knows has your best interest at heart and cares about you, and there's a strong, trusting relationship, I mean, the things that you can do with that is amazing, but building that is the first step. And I think when we're in a school building, that's, in teachers' wheelhouses, but I know a lot of my educator friends are really struggling with that component of building relationships in this virtual environment, which is where, an SEL curriculum, something that's coordinated, gives you that space, that time, and that language, that toolkit of language.
Well, and I really love that because that was a hot topic. Mm-hmm. Our daily drop-ins began every single morning, Monday through Friday back in March. Simply because the world was changing with COVID truly affecting the US. And a lot of people were in different phases going throughout this time. But a very, very common concern that we were hearing continuously was June through the fall of how am I going to build relationships with students that I don't know? And I love this idea of collecting resources, like pulling in Move This World and other tools that you can have in your toolkit to bring them out so you can start building those relationships. But then also reinforcing that just like all of you watching right now, like the Teach Better team is all virtual. So as we talk about like any trust that you have that the daily drop-in will be a fun or enjoyable conversation that could benefit you in some way. Any trust you have that because I brought Jessica into this conversation, she's good people. Like all that trust, it was all built virtually. So it's possible.
Yep.
It's a different strategy than we're used to. It's uncomfortable because it's new. And so in my mind, the only way to move forward is to kind of grab hands and all do it together, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I actually think this is going to sound crazy, but I think it's kind of a blessing, because what it's forcing us to do is really focus in on what is the core of a trusting relationship. When I'm building a relationship with somebody new, what does that really look like? Because I think when we're in person, it can be easy to kind of default into, like you said, the environment that we're in. I'm in a classroom. These are the students in my classroom. We're here together every day. And so we're building a relationship. That's not the case anymore. We have to really be intentional and clear with what even our own skills, self-awareness, self-management. Am I, like you said, I mean, I don't something like that. When that day ends, are you closing your computer and getting into bed because you're exhausted? Or are you doing something to rest, to re-energize yourself, and to prepare for tomorrow? I think it's really, we're under a microscope right now with our social and emotional well-being.
I want to dive into building a core relationship because, Dave Schmittou, Jessica, I'm not sure if you're connected to him. He's maybe one of my favorite people on the planet right now. And he even says, so crazy, I've never met you, Rae Hughart, and yet you're one of my besties. It can be done. I talk to Dave Schmittou once a day, at least. He just published a new course at teachbetteracademy.com on empowerment through leading through empowerment, which I love that topic, that concept. He does so much to support educators. And I know that truly, if I called him and needed something, he'd take a bullet for me. And Dave, I appreciate that. Thank God, that isn't a situation you need to worry about. But my point is that the relationships don't just come out of nowhere, right? They really are building blocks that you have to build this trusting relationship. And then it doesn't matter if you've never met in person before or not. There really are ways to build such strong relationships. Whereas Brianna is commenting right now, so many friends that have come from Teach Better, I've only met a handful in person. I've met Brianna one time. And yet still, she's another person I could call up, and I joke with her all the time, and I stalk her Instagram. I feel very immersed in her life because I have just built this, very long virtual friendship with great people. How do you start that? What focuses should people have as they're trying to build a relationship? What are those core pillars of a strong relationship?
I think that's a really interesting question. I think, all relationships start with our understanding of self, right? I think everything starts with our understanding of self. Understanding, and I think another really important component of that is when you're interacting with people, being really aware of where you are as you're entering that relationship and that interaction. So mindfulness is the word that's coming to mind. And I don't think that's necessarily the right word necessarily, but knowing who you are, what you're looking for in this relationship, what you have to offer, and just being mindful of whenever you're entering that space, what are you carrying with you? Which in this virtual environment, it's in that virtual space. So the first thing I think of, because similarly, I have my teacher friends in person that I taught with. And then in the years that I've been outside of the classroom, my teacher network is educators across the country who most of them I've never met. So my inbox gets stacked, my Twitter gets stacked with people messaging me. And I really try to be mindful in those interactions and be my authentic self, even when we're behind a computer. And I think being able to be your authentic self in a relationship, it sounds so simple and obvious, duh, you have to be you to relate to other people. But that can be challenging, especially when you're virtual and somebody's not in front of your face or you don't know them. And you're just kind of trying to go through your day and focus on your students and focus on what you need to get done and what does your family need from you, and your email inbox is through the roof. So really being mindful of I am a person and this is a person and this is a gift to be able to connect. And not just jotting off that email because you need to reply, but taking a moment to absorb what they've said to you and respond from kind of a neutral place potentially, and not just my day's crazy, but good to talk to you. See you later. Bye.
Right. Right. And I think that we see that in a lot of instances where people can forget that human element of communicating virtually. I mean, the common go-to would be like when someone posts a comment on Facebook that they wouldn't normally say out loud. Like that's a bad example, but in terms of somebody truly not thinking through,
I think it's a great example.
Would I actually have this type of interaction with somebody had I had them right in front of my face versus kind of behind the computer screen? Mm-hmm. I like your connection between that negative interaction of, posting a disrespectful comment, but more so even like connecting it to an email. Somebody can email you and it's very easy to, even a student or a parent or a colleague, it's very easy to say, let me solve your problem, but then I gotta go. Like right. Versus saying, hello, so-and-so, I really hope your day's going well. Here's a tidbit of information. Maybe I'm going to make a joke. Oh yeah. And here's the answer you needed. And by the way, I'm here if you need something. Like really having that human reaction to somebody versus just accomplishing the task to get it off your to-do list. It's a very different approach.
Yeah. So I'd say with that, maybe empathy, self-awareness. I think actually all of the 5 core competencies of social emotional learning are critical for developing relationships. Social awareness, especially interacting with educators across the country. I mean, every school, every classroom is different. Every school is different. Every district is different. And really being mindful. I've had conversations with teachers who are just fully supported. They have all the tools and resources they need. And then I have conversations with teachers who this is one of 3 jobs that they're doing, and they're paying for all of their resources out of pocket. And they're both hardworking and dedicated and amazing educators. But my role in those interactions is being mindful that the social context in which both of these people are working are different. And my social awareness is going to help me form better relationships with each of them. So I think that's also a very critical component.
Well, and that same example can be taken when you're working with a student. I do conferencing. The majority of my day is like conferencing with students. And there's many a times where a student's camera's off and they're muted, and I ask them a question and ask them to share their voice. And as we go through our conference, they're giving me a little to work with, right? I'm like trying to pull teeth out of them. And then you realize that, this has happened to me like twice this year and it kills me inside, but you realize halfway through the conversation, they're upset or they had something going on that you throughout that entire conversation had no context of. So as a teacher, you're like, oh, this kid just doesn't care. They're not responding to me. Like, don't you know where the unmute button is? Like, come on, where going. And then you find out that they are completely working through a different lens and, frustrating situation. And as a teacher, of course, then you shift everything. But there's this idea of being so mindful and wanting to ensure that you fully understand the situation. It's kind of like assuming the worst rather than assuming the best. Like assume they're struggling. That way, I don't know if that makes sense or not, but.
Well, it also, so this is reminding me actually of an exercise that we did recently in a staff meeting. And it was like a whoa moment for me because it gave me a really clear snapshot that I'm not the only person feeling it was just like, we're all feeling a similar frustration. And I really didn't expect it or see it coming. And we were practicing frozen statues, which is in our curriculum. It's in our PD offerings. And we were all standing up. We were all taking deep breaths and thinking about a challenge we were currently facing, and then created a frozen statue that embodies that challenge. And when we did that and we looked at the camera to see everybody's challenge, this happened in one snapshot of a moment, and we were able to see like 15 of my colleagues and get a snapshot of how they're feeling. And everybody had their head covered. The feeling was like this sort of everybody was in these seemingly overwhelmed. There's a million different words you can use to describe it,
sure.
But it was a powerful moment because I could see in an instant that, wow, we're all feeling a little weighed down, and wanting to hide ourselves from whatever we're feeling. And we're all working remotely right now. And so people are all over the country. I don't talk to every single teammate every single day.
Right.
And so in whether the challenge was professionally or personally, the fact that it instantly bonded us because it was like, oh, wow, there's a lot going on. And then it led to offline conversations when the meeting ended. Hey, just wanted to check in. I noticed that you were covering your eyes and I was covering my eyes too. Like, if you ever want to chat, I'm here. What's going on? Mm-hmm. And then, checking in with colleagues every single day to realize that, wow, we're facing a lot of challenges every day. Maybe I want to ask this person every morning, good morning, how are you doing? And that makes such a big, big difference when we're all virtual. So I think it's challenging to be aware of where people are, because so often you say, how are you doing? And your students don't want to answer, or they say, I'm fine. Or when you ask, they don't want to give, but sometimes they can show, and that's just as powerful.
Well, and I love that example, Jessica, because the focus of, like, my biggest struggle right now is not being able to see students like cues, but through your physical body. Like, I love where I work because in the school building I work in, all of the classrooms are in little pods. So it's like a very, very wide hallway. It's like a circle. And there's multiple of them in the school building. So in the pod that I work in, I can stand in the pod and watch students enter and immediately read their body language. You can see what their morning was like, how they, you can see their interaction of, like, did it seemingly start like recently? Are they noticeably upset by something in the immediate space? Or like, have they been struggling all morning long? And do you see just this like exhaustion? And that's so crucial to, I teach 6th grade, like middle school. Like, I need to know their emotional well-being before we get into like the content, like whatever, like we'll get to math later, but are you okay? And there's so many instances almost daily where you're pulling a student aside, removing them from the situation and saying, hey, I care about you. Are you good? Like, can I help? And it's really hard to do that right now when cameras aren't on, or when they may not be sharing with you. Your statue example is allowing that body language to really come forward in the conversation. You as the teacher can read those social cues.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a lot of different ways you can do that too. So another, good, Danielle, I'm happy to see that.
Yeah, Danielle is so grateful for real useful SEL strategies. And that's the point, Jessica, when we were talking about like, you joining us for the Daily Drop-In, I'm like, I just need like quick tips. Everyone just needs something. Like, we focus a lot on not only using your teacher toolkit where you're like feeling like you're pulling a new strategy out of a hat, like you want to find that scalable, that sustainable life. But there's also a reality that when we know we want to do something with students, it's really nice to be able to go back in your back pocket and be like, oh, I learned this morning. Let's try this out. It's so nice.
Yep. Yeah. There was an activity or an exercise that we did in our educator wellness webinar this week that the attendees loved, and it was a discovery drawing. So similarly to creating a statue that shows your challenge and how that challenge makes you feel, asking students to think of a challenge or a success, an achievement they had recently, and drawing it, a 30-second quick draw. As somebody who doesn't draw, I'm a words person. I have been amazed at how powerful that is for me to allow things to come out that I'm not aware of. So when I did it earlier this week, literally I drew a clock and then I just drew like scribbles all around it. And I was like, oh, I'm feeling a lot of anxiety, but I think it may have something to do with like my time. I mean, it sounds insane to say it out loud, but things were coming out of my pen and my drawing that I hadn't had the space to process and understand in my head yet. So discovery drawings are also really, really powerful for students and for adults.
I love discovery drawings. I think that's such a great suggestion. That's something that you can do so quickly with students, and you can share, or they could like upload a picture and then you could look at it later. What I like about that, Jessica, too, is that also can incorporate some giggles. Like, yes, there are some like exploration that you can find out student data, which is so, so important. But on the flip side, the first thing I would do is hold up that clock drawing and it'd be like, wow, this is not my best, right? We can talk about like, Miss Hughart needs to go to an art class, or, this is a funny scale. So I think that actually could add some lighthearted giggles to then the reality of something that you also do want to make sure you address and learn about students. Danielle posted a question here. She says, how might I convince students that being joyful is okay in such tough times? I think that this is a question not only for students, but for teachers. I've been talking to a lot of people on the Daily Drop-In that the Teach Better team has been obviously conducting the past few weeks. And a lot of people are so hesitant to be like, Well, the silver lining is, I mean, people are like feeling like they have to be sad because, I mean, it's a horrific world pandemic. But this is a time where Danielle is saying, yeah, we can understand the severity of our situation, but isn't it good to also find joy and encourage students to find joy?
Absolutely. And I would say it's not just okay and acceptable, but it is critical to identify and cultivate joy for yourself and for others during this time. I think of being able to cultivate joy as your safety net, like the most important toolbox you can have as we're going through a global pandemic, because the world, I mean, I always say this, I'm like, I have my little joy cocoon of my apartment, and then the world outside is a terrifying place for me. And I can sit, it's very easy for me to sit all day and feel stressed and anxious and upset about what is going on outside of there. But the more that I'm able to cultivate joy for myself, that is helping me sustain and work and function amidst such a difficult time. And I also think that joy in this instance with your students, I would link it to gratitude. So I would ask them to think about maybe something that they're grateful for, someone they're grateful for, why they're grateful for them. Remember a time that you had what's your favorite memory with that person? And then really, again, go back to the senses and do some deep breathing as you go back to that moment. What were you doing? Where were you? How did the ground feel beneath your feet? What were you wearing? What was the weather? What did it smell like? Were you eating anything? Was there a taste you can associate with it? And so students can go back to that moment over and over again when they're feeling overwhelmed or stressed or anxious or really burdened by the reality of what we're living in. Is let's go back to that happy place. Let's go back to that good memory and be in that. I think of it as like, that's the well that keeps you going, that you should be able to go and pull from that little joy kit. We actually have an exercise called 3 minutes of happiness. Ooh. And it's naming and defining something that you can do in just 3 minutes that you know is going to make you happy.
What's your go-to for that? Do you have a personal go-to for that?
I do. And it's going to sound lame to other people probably, but it makes me so happy. It's watering my plants. Like, seriously, I stop, I get up from my computer and I have like a little Wonder Woman watering can, and I fill it up and I go and I water all my plants and I check on them and I feel their soil, and it makes me so happy. And I am unapologetically happy in that moment. I'm not just like, I gotta water these plants so they don't die. I'm like, hello plant, I love you, I'm watering you, you're gonna grow. And I make it as happy of a moment for myself as I can, and it turns my mood around every time.
I love that. And it's something that you can control. Like, it doesn't really have a large cost affiliation with it. You can do it anytime you need that pick me up. And I think that like those 3 minutes of happiness is so important, because as you're diving into what makes you happy, it's also a reminder that you should do that as frequently as possible. Like 3 minutes talking about something that you love and then going and doing that thing you love. Watering plants can't take that long, right?
No. I mean, I've acquired a lot of plants in this time.
I want you to know that I can't keep a plant alive for the life of me. So that would be the most anxiety-driven thing ever, because I would be watering them being like, please don't die, please don't die, please don't die.
Right. Well, I think it's important too I think we all know, like, there's things I do that I enjoy, but to really name this, another one I have is petting my pets. And that also doesn't usually take 3 minutes, but I will stop what I'm doing. And I have a cat and a dog, and it drives them crazy, but I'm like, it's cuddle time. Yep. Naming, I pet my pets all day long, right? That's not like an exciting, different activity for me. But when I'm like, I am going to pet my pets for joy, naming it, making it a thing, is really powerful. And I think for how many plants do I have over 30 plants in my room. I am having a problem, Samantha.
I'm sorry. What did you just say? You have over 30 plants in your room?
Just in my room.
Oh my gosh. I have one plant upstairs, and then I have all these fake plants around my house.
I love that's the way to go if you can't. But again, it goes back to really intentionally cultivating that joy. Once I kept a plant alive and I proved that to myself, I was like, this makes me feel good, and I'm leaning all the way into it, and I'm going to make it a part of my everyday life. So especially with students, helping them identify and name those things, name those activities. And that's a tool in your toolkit that you can pull out whenever you need it.
Mm-hmm. No, I really, really like that. My answer would have been time with the dogs. Like, petting them is wonderful, but there is such a different appreciation. I can tell, I mean, I love my dogs, so it's going to sound like a loser, but I can tell they appreciate it too. If I can take 3 minutes, not on a screen, not on a computer, not even watching TV, and just hang with the dogs, like, it refuels me completely. And I joke, I'm like, if I can get 15 to 30 minutes of intentional time with my dogs, my entire day is different. And so I like that concept of not only knowing what those things are, but naming it and choosing to do it is really a way to refuel you. And it doesn't need to be something complicated. I mean, our example so far has been watering plants and like petting a fluffy dog. Like, that's pretty easy. Yep. I think for some people, it's reading a good book, or, taking a nap, or doing some self-care of, like, I know people that love painting their nails, like whatever it is, like sipping coffee. I know we have some great members of our network, and the Zen teacher is one of them. He calls these like pamper triggers, like what is going to make you feel pampered. His example when we interviewed him on the Teach Better Talk podcast was like fuzzy slippers, or like fuzzy socks, like something small.
Love that. Yeah. And I think, again, bringing some awareness and recognition to how that activity makes you feel. And I'm doing this because it makes me feel joy. I know a lot of teachers I work with, their go-to is they grab their kids and they all climb in bed for a little group cuddle.
Yeah, absolutely. This is funny. It amazes me how many students have never actually been given the opportunity to name what brings them joy. Maybe that is a Teach Better challenge today, is as you work with your kiddos, like having them identify and name what brings them joy, and then not judging it. Whatever ends up bringing them joy, saying, wonderful, I'm so glad you know that. Because I think I won't lie, I think a teacher reaction could be, well, you can't, it's like when they say video games and you're like, ugh, video games. Wait, you ask them what brings them joy. It's okay. Everyone can have their own answer.
Yeah. I think for many reasons, we default to recognizing problems, recognizing what's wrong, what's bad, what's stressful. We focus especially teachers, I think, because, people who are like helpers, fixers, servers, you go to where there's a need and how can you fill that need? And I think training your brain to recognize joy, recognize happiness is hard. But again, when you are in those moments of need in your own well-being, that's what's going to pull you out of it. And I think gratitude is a great access. If joy is something that's a little much for your students, starting with gratitude, that's just the gift that keeps on giving.
I love that. And that's so important right now. I hope that everybody takes that as a little Teach Better challenge this morning, is trying to identify what students, are grateful for, sharing their gratitude, and then linking that to joy, and encouraging them to find time to do that every single day, or have a collection of 3 or 4 different things that brings them joy and circulating those throughout their week. I mean, these are really, really important strategies that don't need to take a lot of time, but I love this concept of putting things throughout your day versus waiting until the end of the week or the end of the month, because that's how teacher burnout happens. And we don't need to be embarrassed about it. It doesn't need to be a situation where you then start questioning, like, oh my gosh, am I in the right profession because I'm so tired? Like, you're making an incredible impact. You just need to give yourself a little grace and put more joy in your life. I love that idea.
Yeah. And I would actually not warn, but say, I think that as soon as you feel this was my experience, because I'm a big observer. And I said this before, a jaded burnout teacher, I don't think is doing any favors. And I think there's this kind of feeling of like, it doesn't matter how stressed or anxious or unwell I am in my own well-being. I love my job and my job is important and I have to do it no matter what. But students learn just as much from observing us as they do from what we teach them. And so if you are just if you're in survival mode, just trying to get through your days and get through this school year because it's your first year teaching or whatever, and next year is going to be better.
Yeah.
You're modeling that for students.
Yeah.
And they're absorbing that way of being. And so I think this is also why I'm, will talk all day long about the need for an evidence-based SEL curriculum, because that's where administrators can really have a critical role in creating space and focus for their school community, that we value the social and emotional well-being of not only our students, but of our staff and of everybody's families.
I love your focus, and you've said it numerous times throughout this dialogue, so I really, really know it's rooted in you, but this focus of modeling these practices. Like, you cannot teach students to be aware of their emotional well-being and make healthy choices if you are not truly living that yourself. And I wrote about this in Teachers Deserve It. It was one of my favorite sections that Adam and I put together, which had to do with like accomplishing your to-do list. Like, I know so many educators that have that endless to-do list, and at the end of the day, if they didn't cross everything off, they're frustrated. They feel, and I'm like, great. So what is that modeling for your students? Like, you're saying, work your butt off, hustle as hard as you can, and if you don't reach the end goal that you had set for yourself, you should be shameful. You should be embarrassed. You should have that ruin the rest of your day. And there's just a reality to like, well, of course you'd never want to model that. And you're like, well, but we do. And we have to intentionally make sure that the choices we want our students to be making, we also are making them for ourselves. I love that.
Yeah. I think this is where, and I heard it from my colleagues when I was in the classroom and we started like trickling in SEL strategies. I hear it all the time now. Oh, this is another thing to put on my plate, or, oh, this is another thing to put on my teacher's plates. And I've heard a lot of educators say this, and this is how I think of it as well, that social emotional learning is the plate. Social emotional learning is a journey that never ends. You never arrive. It's never like, we are now self-aware. We have great responsible decision-making skills. Social emotional awareness is an ongoing thing for all of your life. And the more that you practice that as a teacher, the greater capacity that you're going to have for supporting your students. And I'm so sorry.
Sorry. I'm trying to get out of your room.
Hold on a second.
All good. For everybody listening, I do want to give you a little tidbit that we are going to be wrapping up our daily drop-in here in just a second. Jessica, I want you to finish your thought, and then I would love for you to also share how people can stay connected to you. I know there's a ton of free webinars that you're hosting. Obviously, there's a ton of curriculum and information on Move This World, but there really are some free opportunities for all of you to dabble with. This isn't like a sales pitch. I just love the work that Jessica and her team is doing. And we continue to just try and bring you guys in to support as many educators as possible.
Yeah, the lucky thing is most of the things I've talked about today are free resources that you can find on our website. If you go to movethisworld.com, go to our blog, we have a whole COVID resource library. And we've taken some bite-sized pieces from our curriculum and made them into downloadable, actionable resources. Like the 3 Minutes of Happiness is one in there. But yeah, what I was saying earlier, I think SEL is just the plate that allows you to function better. It allows you to have more time and more capacity in your day to get through your to-do list, and then to know how to react and shift paces if you don't get through your to-do list. And it supports your students in the same way. I am always amazed at how much more I am able to accomplish in my day when I am practicing these strategies on a regular basis versus when I just kind of drop them and let them go and I just try to get through the day. I get less done.
I have had so much reflection on that recently as we've transitioned from hybrid to remote and then back to hybrid and then back to remote. Like it is something we so need to keep in our mind. Jessica, how can people connect with you specifically?
So I am on Twitter at Jessica Rae Alt. I don't know if I can add to the chat here.
We can link it. Yeah, absolutely.
You can also find Move This World on Twitter at move_this_world. On our website or on our YouTube channel, you can see some examples of videos from our curriculum. In that resource library that I mentioned, we also have a collection of videos from our curriculum that we have made publicly available because we know that this is such a critical time. And so we want more people to have access to these resources. In addition to our pre-K through 12 curriculum, our PD offerings for next year include Visioning Lab series. So not just PDs to help you use Move This World and do well with our program, but PD series around educator wellness, around processing trauma, around, supporting your community through COVID-19. So our educator wellness series webinars pull some strategies out of those visioning lab series. Our next one is going to be on December 15th. If you are on our website and you subscribe to our mailing list, you will get an invitation to that webinar. So I encourage you to come join us. We'll be practicing some exercises rooted in reflection.
I love it. And Jessica, I know we're having one of your colleagues join us here in a few weeks as well. We'll be chatting with Dave Schmittou. Kendall, I think is her name, correct?
Yes.
We'll be able to talk more strategy. So if you're listening right now, go connect with Move This World. Go connect with Jessica, all the work her team is doing. And then make sure you continue to join us for the Daily Drop-In, because we have somebody coming in next week who's going to be really focused on incorporating physical movement into the classroom. The following week, Kendall's joining us to talk more about SEL support and all these things in between. So please, please, please remember, you can catch all these videos, whether you're watching us live at 8:30 a.m. Eastern in the morning, or these are saved on all the platforms they stream on: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch, as well as being a bonus episode of Teach Better Talk podcast, because we are just trying to be available and trying to be as helpful as humanly possible. Jessica, we're going to hang tight here, but we're going to say goodbye to everybody else. I hope you all have
I forgot one last thing. I'm so sorry if we have a minute. So we also have 2 podcasts that I really encourage everybody to go listen to, because next week's podcast, we talk to 3 principals. It's our season finale. It's called the Sarahcast, Conversations in Social Emotional Learning. We're talking to 3 principals who have schools that are at various opening levels. Just some real talk about what this year has been like and what they're looking ahead to for the next semester.
Oh my gosh, so many resources. Guys, go collect these resources. When we know better, we do better, and we believe in you. So take time to learn, and then take time for yourself to process, and then surround yourself with good people. We'll just keep on tracking. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us. And everyone here, we wish you nothing but an absolutely wonderful Friday. We'll see you guys later.